brother just told me. Jay, why are we laughing so much? How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
No, I already did that with the other
I should
guy.
say that.
Him and Beowulf and...
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me. Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
All right, Jay, it's Teacher Talk. We're back right here at the tail end of the Odyssey. No one thought we'd ever get there. I heard it over and over again. Oh, they'll never make it. You know, back when we were in book 3, book 8, book 12, 24 was like eons away. And here we are at book 23. Book 23 in my translation says, The Trunk of the Olive Tree. So we're book 23. Did you ever think we'd make it, Jay, or no?
I had all the confidence in the world, actually.
Wow, that is inspiring.
I never doubted it.
Yeah.
Folks, people that are listening, when Paul's in Ohio and I'm in Massachusetts now, when we worked together, we spent a lot of hours not working together.
Oh, my goodness.
We spent a lot of hours just doing this. So frankly, for us, this is just a way to be our normal selves.
Yeah.
But you're invited too. I mean, that's
my great sadness is I no longer get paid, for doing this as I did back in the day.
Maybe someday, Paul.
And talked. I know. Someday, someday we'll be back there with that heavy mix of Pete's coffee. What was it? Major
Dickinson's blend.
Major Dickinson's blend. Yes, you and I just traded off buying that the big bag and just having it on.
I meant to send you a picture. That like huge coffee maker that you brought and bought in.
Yeah.
That's still there. Like no one knows the history of that.
Yeah, where that came from.
Huge like if you were attacked, you could kill somebody with this.
But it got you through. It got you through the day.
Yeah.
If you drank coffee obsessively, hour for hour, like we did, it got you through. Well, I'm still doing it, but pathetically, I'm using one of those Keurig machines, which is an assault on the senses, at every single level. But that's what they have at my new school. And
well,
I just got to go with it.
It's a first world problem, but I have to say, I got a plastic reusable pod and I just buy the Major Dickinson's grounds and I put it in.
Yeah.
So
it's not horrible.
You get the coffee you want.
It's not as horrible as it could be.
No, absolutely not.
True. It's true.
Think of how far we've come. My grandmother drank Folgers Crystals instant coffee. I mean, this is progress.
Wow. Yeah.
I know they were the greatest generation, but we're much better at certain things, and that includes coffee. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how she survived on Folgers Crystals.
Just Crystals and Parliament, like without a filter, I think is what she. Parliament cigarettes, Folgers Crystals.
Yeah, both at the same time. Like,
yeah.
I know, and I always tell that to students when we get to places in certain literature. What is that book? They've got the smoking room in the book, a separate piece. That's it.
Yeah.
In the separate piece, the butt room exists.
Sure.
And I always tell students, come on, your school used to have a smoking room for high school
students.
In the
70s, the school we used to work at together, where I am now, had a room where students and teachers would smoke together. This was in our lifetime, Paul.
Yeah. It's not like going back to Beowulf era or whatever. Yeah. No.
Good old days.
Now, students and teachers would be put in prison for that. Be put in prison forever.
This is a student-centered approach to learning, I think.
Yeah, it is. And some study needs to be made about the correlation between, test scores and nicotine. Test scores and nicotine.
I know we have to get to the Odyssey, but kid came in today. We had a professional day on Friday. They had a snow day on Thursday. I'm so tired. Now, there was a kid in the front, and I let my seniors drink coffee. And I just say, if you're going to make a mess, we'll stop all bets are off. But in general, if you pick up after yourself, whatever, you want to bring a coffee, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So I said, who's not tired? Bill. Bill's drinking coffee. There's a way around this. Buy coffee.
Yeah.
and you won't be wimpy and tired.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
No, start the addiction early.
It's better living through chemistry. Let's be honest.
It's true. Build your capacity. I mean,
Yeah.
I can drink a pot of coffee a day. You know how long it took me to get to that place? I mean, years. And if I'd have started earlier, I'd be further along than I am now. So I encourage kids.
You know, you did the right thing. Hey, I'm going to start with a poem. This, in the Emily Wilson translation, her chapter is called "The Olive Tree Bed." This is very much Penelope's chapter.
Oh, it is. It is. Yeah.
So I was poking around and I found this really interesting poem called, it's a very cryptic title, "The Marriage Bed Poem."
Wow. Okay.
That's
literally the name. The Marriage Bed Poem.
And it's by a guy named Ken Nye, Nye.
Okay.
And I think this is really good. So I think I'm going to talk a little later about this, but I just think in the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer sees everything and talks about everything. It isn't simply a war poem and a coming home from war poem. Yeah. Literally every aspect of human life is honored and acknowledged. And I think that includes intimate husband and wife relationships. So this is Ken Nye's The Marriage Bed Poem.
Okay.
They have kissed their parents goodbye, mom's wiping tears, dad's trying to hold it together. Alone in the hotel room, man and wife, woman and husband, they climb into bed. In time, the physical relationship, which begins as a new adventure, diminishes in passion and urgency. But it is in this bed, when there is darkness outside and only these two people matter, that the closeness of their bodies strengthens the union of their hearts, and skin on skin acts like an electric wire, transmitting strength one to the other. As time goes on, the love expressed under those sheets and comforters grows in complexity and intensity. The two middle-aged people who curl up, pressed against each other, an arm of one draped over the other, find in that bed a haven from the bills yet to be paid, jobs that lack satisfaction, parents who don't want to give up their homes and cars and independence. And in the later years, when the bodies of these two old friends begin to break down, and there looms on the horizon the inevitable end of their life together, they sleep through the night, hand in hand, breathing in unison, certain that the bond that was born on the first night in their marriage bed will endure beyond the time when one of them does not waken.
Oh my gosh, Jay!
Paul, isn't that? I just discovered this.
Oh my gosh, Jay! Your judgment as a poetry reader is just it's unimpeccable, unimpeachable.
It's so, Paul, am I right? It's so good.
This is fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I thought you'd like it.
I love that. You just have to make it, don't you? You just have to get through as a married couple. You have to get through. You have to get through each of those stages. You got to make it to that end. You're facing death. Golly. Oh. And it's unbelievably perfect for this chapter. It's literally what we see in this chapter is the culmination. And it's all back. It's all back in the marriage bed. It all comes down to the marriage bed. It's such a beautiful symbol. It's a powerful scene, and it's all in Penelope's hands, really. It's all in their hands here. Odysseus can do nothing but sit there in a chair and wait and either reap the benefits of all of his, masterful warfare, skill, or just be turned out into the streets, which seems like it could have happened, It doesn't. I love that. I love that. Ken Nye, The Marriage Bed Poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That's great. That's great. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
We definitely need that, and people need to read that some more, and I need to read it again. Well, let's jump right in. Jay, we've got kind of a short chapter here, but an extremely satisfying chapter. And the juxtaposition of this chapter to the previous one is also fantastic because
Right.
I don't know which one is more satisfying. You'd think the previous one. How could you top the previous chapter where the people who have it coming get it?
Get it.
But
Yeah.
this chapter, I don't know. I think this one might live in. This could top it. This might live in your memory from reading the story, and I think it does for me much more vividly, much more powerfully than Death in the Great Hall, the last chapter. So let's do our little frame up. I think I've kind of broken the frame up in my mind for this chapter, but maybe I have it. I don't know. Do you want to go with what do you have as the obvious and the essential from this chapter? What do you got to get, to take from this chapter for your students, Jay?
Yeah. So I just want to mention in terms of summary, I'm not going to summarize it, but one thing, because at the last third of the Odyssey, I teach this to kids who struggle. But by the last third, I'll ask them to make predictions. Like they know, I mean, it's called the olive tree bed. And I have here a couple of notes. First is I ask students, like my students that read this are 14 or 15. And I imagine them I tell them, imagine being 35. And I know you could probably park in the handicap spaces by then.
How are you even still alive at 30?
I know, yeah. But I tell them, think of the people you love, whether they're friends or family. 20 years, they're going to change. How do you recognize them? What are things, what stories or pieces of information could you share so that that person is that person? And we talk about that. And I think what you said is really important, which is this also is a work of literature. It's not a set of ideas. So the fact that you go from the bloodshed of book 22 to the sort of marital intimacy of book 23 is a really stark, dramatic juxtaposition. And it makes for really good literature. It reminds us that this is a poem where men have to get killed.
Yeah.
But people also love each other and both can live side by side. So I think that's really important. In terms of my obvious, it's largely about the recognition scene or the ananeresis, which is Aristotle's term, the moment of recognition.
Yeah, that's right.
Regarding the bed. And I was poking around and there's a few books. When we're done, Paul, I just want to put this out there.
Yeah.
I would love to make a video of resources that are helpful. And one of them is this fascinating book about by a guy named Daniel Mendelsohn. He's a classics professor at Bard. And he wrote a book. Did I mention this book to you yet?
I don't think so.
Oh, so I think it's called like an Odyssey, a father and a son. I think those words are in the title. But basically, he's a classics professor at Bard, single guy. And his dad is I think he's either a World War II or Korean War vet, engineer. And he went to school and studied Latin, but he never had a chance to pursue it much because he had a job and a family. Long story short, the dad audits the son's class and he promises not to talk. And of course he does. And it's a combination of the classicist's reading of the Odyssey, but also his story about reconnecting with his dad. And wow, you think someone that really well and you don't. And it's this really, it's like a memoir. You would love it.
Wow.
And in that, I think it's in that book that he talks about olive trees.
Okay.
And I didn't realize this. I'm going to talk about the scene starting in line 172 of this translation, and I'll read a little bit of it. But I didn't realize that olive trees are a sort of motif that in book 5, olive trees preserve Odysseus. And then in book 9, when he stabs Polyphemus's eye, it's with the branch of an olive tree.
Oh my gosh, I never knew that.
In book 12, he hangs on to a fig tree, so a different kind of tree, to survive the whirlpool. And then in book 13, when he gets home, olive trees are very prominent when he returns home to the safety of his home. So trees in general and olive trees specifically end up being consistently important. And what I'm thinking it's Mendelssohn, I hope I'm right, says that even now in the Mediterranean, a piece of property's value is often measured by the number of olive trees on the property.
Wow.
So trees, but olive trees specifically, signal life. And we get that sense in the Odyssey. So on line, I think it's 172, down, Penelope tells Eurycleia to make a bed for Odysseus, and Odysseus says, "Woman, your words have," this is like 184, "Woman, your words have cut my heart. Who moved my bed? It would be difficult for even a master craftsman, though a god could do it with ease. No man," and what's fascinating is "no man" is the phrase he uses in book 9.
Only no man could move it. Yeah.
Right. No man, however young and strong, could pry it out. There's a trick to how this bed was made. I made it. No one else inside the court there grew an olive tree with strong, long leaves, full grown and green, as sturdy as a pillar. And the description we get, Paul, what's interesting to me, I was thinking about this today, the vividness and the love that this is described with, to me is an echo of when Odysseus builds the raft to leave Ogygia in book 9.
Okay.
That almost nothing is described with so much love and affection in the Odyssey as Odysseus building the raft, except maybe Odysseus building the olive tree. So both represent, I would argue, a particular kind of liberation and a particular kind of position of safety in his life. He's leaving to get home, and then the olive tree bed represents, like, it's my marital bed, but it's also so rock solid that it's connected to the ground itself.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And two, the juxtaposition of Calypso and Penelope. One's a raft away from Calypso, a sort of inferior mirror image of Penelope, although she's a goddess. And then one is a raft of safety toward Penelope, his true partner or whatever. Oh my gosh, it's too beautiful.
So I just, this, obviously we've been waiting. It's a Nostos poem. It's a poem of homecoming, and it's a poem of the longing for home. And the particular closeness he strives for the most, I would argue, isn't the "I want to be the king of Ithaca again." I think it's important to remember that Odysseus chose Penelope over her cousin Helen, who was the most beautiful woman. Every other guy was going after Helen. He went after Penelope. I think there's a closeness to them. Well, I'm going to get to that later with my subtle point.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it's very powerful. And I think the symbolism of what the bed means and how it's connected to all the other moments of safety for him is relevant.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. The bed as a safety raft. It's a fantastic, it's a fantastic image, fantastic symbol. Yeah, I like it. I can't.
What's yours, Paul?
Yeah, I can't get over the obvious is just, and I don't know if this is even obvious, but it's, I want to say the power of Penelope, but it's the significance of Penelope in this chapter. This is her chapter. Books 1 through 4 are Telemachus's chapter, and then him back again here at the end, shoulder to shoulder with his father in books 22, and then in book 24 again. Those are Telemachus's. That's his cycle. And then Odysseus is every other chapter. This is Penelope's chapter, and it's and it's significant, and it's magnificent. It's also believable. And as I've said before, I think this is the place, and you kind of read the scenes where Penelope bests Odysseus. So I don't know that that's the obvious and essential. So my obvious and essential and subtle but crucial kind of mixed together here, lie together into one, which is Penelope's just openness. Her vulnerability in this scene is so passionate and so So amazing. It just draws you into the story at such a deep level. Page 432. There, leaning against a pillar, sat the man and never lifted up his eyes, only waited for what his wife would say when she had seen him. And she, for a long time, sat deathly still in wonderment. For sometimes she gazed and she found him. Yes, clearly, there it is, my husband. But sometimes just blood and rags were all she saw.
Yeah.
And then Telemachus is exasperated. Eurycleia is exasperated. Come on, woman, what's wrong with you? Cruel mother? Do you feel nothing? Come on, dad's home. And then Penelope, almost in kind, in the same level of exasperation. I'm stunned, child. I can't speak. I can't question him. I can't keep my eyes on his face. If really he is Odysseus, if he's truly home, then, and here's the line, the sort of bait she throws out on the water. Then beyond all doubt, we two shall know each other better than anyone. There are secret signs that we know, we two. And this is great. The secret signs, as it turns out, because in a story have explicit secret signs, but they're symbols of the intimate connection that deeply connected people have. And you can put them in whatever signs you want. It could be a tattoo in a place no one knew about, or something like that, or it can be this bed scene, which is just a fantastically rich symbol that Odysseus made a bed for he and his wife and for his future family out of the earth and out of life, out of trees, out of life itself, I guess. Yep. It's just fantastic. But she puts it out there, and Odysseus knows then he knows he's not going to be spending the night out down by the water, because it says a smile came now to his lips of the patient hero Odysseus, who turned to Telemachus and said, give your mom a break, she'll figure it out. But he knew whatever secret sign she was going to resort to, he would know it. He'd be able to interpret it. He had the little decoder ring, as it were, to out it. So it's a fantastic scene of tension. It's a fantastic scene of setup that sets Penelope up for what she does, which is she throws out a final test, and it is the test that exasperates Odysseus. It's the test that he basically fails when she says, I can't sleep with him. I don't know he's my husband. Nurse, take my bed, put it out in the hall, make it up, let him sleep on it. Yep. And then it's like she waits, waiting, pause, because the true Odysseus would know that was impossible. You cannot move the bed. It cannot be done. It will not be the bed if you move it. It'll be destroyed. It'll be just a pile of sticks. And that was the sign. That was the sign. But Odysseus bites. He's upset by it. He says, "What? Who destroyed my bed? No one could do that without." And she's like, "Ha, got you. And it's you." And she runs to him, throws herself at him. It's beautiful. It's a great, I don't know. I don't think I've seen in any movie that's better than this. It's fantastic. It would be filmed beautifully too. So that's sort of my obvious. You got to get that. You got to settle in on this. And then the subtleties in it are, they just go on and on and on. They're fantastic. So you got to spend time there when you're teaching this with students. And I think students can appreciate it,
I agree. And I think one thing, I don't to generalize. Yeah. Everybody generalizes. No, I don't like to generalize.
I never do it.
But it seems like something that great literature consistently does is that it asks us, how do we know another person or ourselves?
Yeah.
God. And I think of Hamlet, I think of Pride and Prejudice, I think of Paradise Lost, I think of Beloved, and this question seems to be really important in Homer, in that particularly the challenges of recognizing a soldier returning home from a traumatic experience. Can you go home again? Is home the same thing? Am I a different person? And what does me being different mean to my return home? I mean, how many men, Paul, in our life, older relatives, went to war and came back and they were different, and because they were different, home was different.
Oh.
You know, so I think the poem really speaks to that. But imagine like whatever generation we're talking about, whether it's Vietnam, Korea, World War
Yeah.
II, whatever, Gulf War, Iraq War, you do that every day. You fight for survival every day. You're in a foreign landscape every day. You're getting shot at every day. And then you go home and your wife's asking you to pick up milk and eggs. You know, you're vacuuming, you're doing the lawn.
Yeah.
And how do you recognize not only are you going to be different coming home, but because your wife's held it together? Think of like the World War II generation, your grandparents and my grandparents. It's not our grandmothers had it easy.
Yeah.
They were fighting to keep stuff together at home. So imagine just the complexity of the unification of those moments that probably no one really was talking about. And I think of line 234.
Okay.
It says, this might have been the passage you just quoted. This is just different translation, but
Sure.
Odysseus held his love, his faithful wife, and wept. And then there's a cool epic simile. As welcome as the land to swimmers when Poseidon wrecks their ship at sea and breaks it with great waves and driving winds. A few escape the sea and reach the shore, their skin all caked with brine. Grateful to be alive, they crawl to land. So glad was she to see her own dear husband. I mean, it's not really a coincidence that her seeing her husband is connected to someone who's been, you know, endangered on the sea, because that's literally her husband.
Right. It's literally a case. Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful moment. Athena holds the night back.
Yeah.
And what they end up doing, which is on line 298 of the Wilson, when the couple enjoyed their lovemaking, that happens in one line. It's not a 50 Shades of Odysseus situation.
Right.
I joke with the students. I'm like, today's sex. We're going to have sex today. There's sex in the book. And they're like, all right, ready? The couple enjoyed their lovemaking. You guys all right? Everybody good? That was it. That was the whole thing.
Nobody's calling home, you know, freaking out. Yeah.
Nope. And the next line is, they shared another pleasure telling stories.
I know. That's such a great line.
I just think this is a real, so I'm talking to teachers here.
Yeah.
Or people that are, anybody teaching kids. I'm not saying we have to reveal our own life in relationships with kids.
Yeah.
But how valuable is it for kids, many of whom are reading this before being in a serious relationship, to maybe begin thinking about the simple fact that relationships, while about physical attraction, are also about the ability to tell each other stories.
Yeah.
Story of your day, story of what's bothering you, whatever it is. And I think the less exotic elements of relationships don't really hit kids. They imagine it as a more, whether it's sexual or whatever. And Homer he not only seems to know what war feels like and what struggling from war feels like, I don't really know what he doesn't understand. Like, he seems to understand that really good relationships are largely about the capacity of sharing each other's stories with each other.
Yeah. And they're not devoid of sex. It's not right. That's not there. And I think for our students, as you point in, you know, or as you sort of point toward this, sex is a symbol of intimacy, because you can't imagine it. You really don't know what it's like until you've gone down that path with someone. Yeah. And the sex is the physical representation of it, because we're embodied souls. But the soulish part of it, which in this passage is beautifully represented by the stories, right? Penelope tells her story of men waging war against or in favor of her beauty. You know, I think how this translation says it, something like that. And then Odysseus tells his story of the onslaughts, the blows given and the blows taken, you know, back and forth is kind of how it's said in this translation. And so they both talk about the battles that they fought. But the story they have in common was represented by the bed, which is their past, which however they recognize themselves in the present, it's not physical. They don't recognize themselves physically in the present. Right. It's only by a shared secret, which is a great synecdoche key. It's a great part of whole sort of representation of relationship, which is so deep and so ineffable that you really can't say it. It can't be explained. You just have to put something in there and say, oh, they recognize each other's secret sign. Well, what's that to people who've been apart from 20 years? Maybe they're totally different in their old secret. No. They have this, and that is a great representation of sexual intimacy too. It's a secret. It is literally a secret between two people that can't be objectified without being destroyed, really. Thank you, pornography. But actual personal intimacy, that's just the way it works. Try if you want to make it into something else. It's not going to work. And you find it here in Homer. Like you said, what didn't Homer, what didn't he understand? It's tough to track down.
I also think, and Jonathan Shea brings this up in Odysseus in America really vividly with his clinical research, that he doesn't diagnose Odysseus with PTSD. But one thing he does talk about really eloquently is the challenges of intimacy after combat trauma.
Okay.
It isn't as Odysseus got back in book 13. And it takes to book 23 for him to reconnect with his wife.
That's 10 books ago. Yeah.
So it isn't easy for him to trust. And one of the things that's fascinating to me, we meet Odysseus in book 5, and our early interactions with him are Calypso saying, "Good news, you can go home," and he mistrusts her. "You're trying to trick me." Penelope has the same exact response when anybody says Odysseus will come home. That it's like the effects of war itself or missing a spouse who's been in war. The effects are, I can't fathom being whole again.
Yeah.
And that's a very human, I would imagine, Paul, that's a very realistic human response to that sort of brokenness.
Yeah.
That again is with all the gods and the whirlpools and the monsters, and it is an incredible work of at least emotional realism that you can have, superficially speaking, on the surface of things, a fantasy landscape. We know this from Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, whatever. But with strong emotional realism, and I think that's what we have here. That they're together, but it isn't as if it's honeymoonish. Like there's a brokenness still. They're not done connecting.
Yeah,
they're just starting.
Right.
And that's great.
Right. And it's intense. And this sort of bleeds into the lingering elements of the book that of the chapter that I'm so impressed with, is that they get right down to the details. Odysseus tells her about the trouble that's yet to come. It's not over. He says it's not over. And then also he tells her about what he found out in the land of the dead. And whatever that means, I just can't read it, literally. Obviously, it has to mean something else to me. And I'm not sure entirely what to make of it. But whatever it means, when you're talking about death and you're talking about the land of the dead, what he found out there, I think that is the most intimate. That is like the most intimate, the most personal kind of information that you find out. Because anyone who can face death, and almost none of us can, we all sort of delude ourselves, about it constantly. That idea of the denial of death, which was a book I read by that title called The Denial of Death, that just completely rocked me. That gets to our deepest selves, and Odysseus goes right there to your point of, can they reconnect and be intimate again? I think it's not just the physical part, but it's the telling the stories and then the intensities of the stories. He said, I faced death, and this is what I found out. And he tells her about his story, what he has to do, what Tiresias told him that he has to do, and how he will die. I mean, why is he talking about his death on the night that they're reunited? That's so intense. Save that for later, possibly.
Right.
maybe just focus on the wins for now, impress each other, and have a good time. Yep. No, he gets right to it, and that may be a picture of your ability to reconnect. The people in my life, who went. I had two who I spent time with as a kid. One, a grandfather who'd been in World War II and faced death.
Yeah.
And then an uncle who'd been in Vietnam came and lived with us for a few months for a time after being in prison and things like that. Never really resettled back into life. I don't think they were that honest. I think of all the problems they had, they were unable to be, if you had to summarize them, they were unable to be honest and reveal and open themselves up after whatever happened to them. And it was tragic and awful in both cases. But Odysseus gets right to it with Penelope and opens it right up all the way to the point of personal annihilation. And it seems to make all the difference, I guess,
Yeah.
So it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's sort of what I have for my the lingering sort of lingering questions. How do they get right to this? And that the book doesn't close here in this book, as you might notice. We have one more book to go. So Homer is open to taking on what I think, just plot wise too, is a more difficult thing. It doesn't resolve here. This is where the credits ought to be rolling. This is where we're used to seeing the credits.
This is my lingering. You're speaking to my lingering question, which is, why aren't we done? I mean, all the suitors are dead. He's achieved his nostos, his return home. He's reunified with his wife. His son's clearly ready to be a man, right? But we have this Tiresias prophecy left, and also, spoiler, Homer, and I feel like Shakespeare's a master at this in the English tradition.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of a moment and he's aware of something on the margins that no one else would be aware of. You and I talked Romeo and Juliet. That was our first set of pods.
Yeah.
And Juliet fakes her own death the morning of her supposed wedding. Shakespeare, as a blue-collar glove maker, realized the day of a wedding, they'd be hired musicians. They have to show up. Musicians show up and realize, she's dead, so it's a different playlist. That's the only difference.
Right.
He knows that.
He doesn't have to write, but he knows it. He's aware of it. He does.
Yeah, and he knows that Ophelia dies. Hamlet's returning home. Well, someone's gonna have to dig the friggin' hole. We should give that guy a scene.
Turns out that scene is a coup, right? In the whole play.
Yeah, and I think Homer, I would love to study this more. There's no evidence that Shakespeare knew Homer, but there's something universally human about the whole experience of life. And that here, we know that if you slaughter 108 guys, they have relatives that are probably not going to be happy.
Yeah, right.
So then what? And then who's going to react to Odysseus' response? He seems to know any good reader's questions they have, and he answers them in the text.
And he doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't hide from it. There's not that, kind of moment that we're all used to, and you just accept in the motif of Hollywood movies. But in this, you can ask that question. Hang on. They just killed the sons of the senators, the Silicon Valley billionaires, and that's just going to be okay? Yeah, I don't think so. Well, Odysseus knows. Yeah, he knows it's not going to be okay. And I want to point out, I like something you just said too, which I don't think we've said before, is that Odysseus also gives closure to Telemachus. In a way, he almost makes up for 20 years of absence. He gives his son his manhood, an opportunity to be a manhood and to stand shoulder to shoulder with his dad, to put things right in their household. And surely that makes up for years and years and years of not being there, going to the basketball games, as it were. So it's a fantastic gift, a resolution he gives to Telemachus, which isn't quite done either. It shows up again in the next book.
Yeah.
But that's true. So the story ends with that. It doesn't end yet. He takes on, wait a minute, there's one lingering thing. We've got problems. Also, he recognizes my dad. My dad's still up in the woods, and I haven't talked to him yet. This day I'm off up country, he says the next morning, to the orchards. I must see my noble father, for he missed me sorely. And so he's got to go up and do his duty there. And it's kind of brilliant plotting that he brings this thing of resolving the issue with the with the relatives of the suitors, alongside of reconciling himself to his father and giving his father what must be the greatest, and his father doesn't die in the chapter, but the greatest death ever. He sets him up for the most satisfying end ever. And it's just brilliant. If only we could all be sons so successful and noble. So Odysseus is both as a father and as a son and as a husband. You could really hate this. You could really hate this guy. You could hate him.
Yeah.
He seals it all up beautifully. But I like that.
What do you have for your lingering question?
Well, that's it. That's it. Same with you, which is you have to see both the power, and I think it's a literary point I want to make, both the power of the resolution, bringing Odysseus and Penelope back together. They stay up all night together, reuniting physically, but reuniting through their stories as well. And then she says, may as well lay it on me. What's the final concerns? He's like, well, there are some, and here it is. And so he lays it out there for her, and she takes it in. She can take it. She can hear it. It doesn't ruin the night or ruin their moment or something. And then he's up bright and early the next morning. No time to linger. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant plotting. It's fantastic writing. Not only for, as you've said, Jay, the paying attention to the corners of the story, but for the plausibility of it all at the same time. And that's something in narrative it's very difficult to get. It's one of the difficult things in plotting, is making it actually believable, while also being veridical and intense and then just dramatic, keeping the reader turning the page. So it sort of does all those things, which I think is proof of, or maybe answer to the question, something you said at the beginning of this podcast. I teach this book to 15-year-olds, and you've said before, many of whom are not the best readers in the school, to say the least. And yet you get through it. We get through it. It has to work. I mean, it just has to work. And so this is kind of proof and evidence that it does. So yeah, I'll go with that. I'll go with that as my lingering sort of awe or lingering question for the book, is that scene that sets up the final chapter. It just keeps rolling so much. To your point of your question, why aren't we done yet? That you start to think of it now, especially when you realize the story isn't over. You might start to ask, well, how does this book end? Can it come to an end? It's so brilliant of keeping it going. How exactly do you land this plane? And so that's kind of exciting and satisfying too. And that's in our final book 24. Yeah.
I'm sad that Homer, we don't have any of it. Evidently, we think, and unfortunately, the Library of Alexandria burned. We think that he wrote lots of epics, not just these two.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. But I joke with my students, hey, we could spend the whole high school career just reading Homer.
Wouldn't that be great?
And they look at me like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, like never was I so happy that a library burned to the ground. Otherwise, Mr. Pollock, would have it. Oh no, it burned. Oh, that's sad. Jeez, yeah.
But I'm excited for book 24, and just for folks listening, Paul and I have some potential sort of fun surprises after we're done with 24.
Yeah,
and make sure folks subscribe, and also equally importantly, tell us how the poem's going for you, and ask us questions or tell us what you think. I mean, Paul and I we love teaching this, but it's not like either of us have a PhD in classics. So if you have an experience that's different or have a reading that's different, chime in.
Yeah, it would be great. That's the whole point of this is to get this back on the table, back in the classroom. As the poet says at the beginning of the story, to lift the great song again, tell it for our time. It's going to be a different telling. It's particular telling, but we think it works. And if you're going through it, we'd like to hear about it and hear how you're approaching it. So maybe we'll do that. We'll end off with some of our colleagues who've taught this as well, or I don't know what. We'll see what we can drum up.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Very nice. Very nice, Jay. That's book 23. It's done. I think it's done. Is that it? Is that enough?
Yeah, we're coming to the home stretch.
I know. It's so sad. I don't even know what to do after this.
We're gonna find some. We're gonna tease it out. We're not gonna say it now. We have a plan, folks.
Oh yeah, we've got a plan. Just like we've learned, just like Odysseus, we're always scheming.
We're not gonna kill as many people.
No.
That's the difference.
We're going to still try to not violate that first rule of everything. You know, I've got teaching down to 3 rules. The first rule of teaching is don't be boring. And I think that's kind of the first rule of everything. So hopefully we can move on without being boring.
Hey, good chatting, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jay. Enjoyed it. Appreciate your insights. Appreciated that poem that queued it up. Queued up the book beautifully. I'm going to go check that out. Ken Nye, the marriage bed poem. All right, Jay. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you next episode. Final book of the Odyssey.
All right. See you, Paul.